I thought I was being scammed by some clever thief, racking up charges on my credit card like a pro, but it turned out the real thief was sleeping in my bed, snoring softly while I played detective. It's the kind of twist that makes you laugh, shake your head, and wonder how you didn't see it coming. Let me take you through it, step by step, because this isn't a sob story, it's a comedy of errors starring yours truly, a man who knows his worth and isn't afraid to walk away with a grin. It started with the credit card statement. I was sipping my morning coffee, flipping through the mail, when I spotted it. 200 at some place called the Willow Inn. Never heard of it. Never been there. Then 75 at a steakhouse called the Rusty Fork. I don't even like steak too much chewing for too little payoff. My first thought? Identity theft. Some slick criminal had nabbed my card details and was living large on my dime. I wasn't about to let that slide. I grabbed my phone, a notepad, and a pen, ready to channel my inner Sherlock and bust this scam wide open. I called the Willow Inn first. The receptionist was chipper, too chipper for 9 a.m., and she described a couple checking in under my name. A woman with long blonde hair, a man with hair slicked back like he'd watched too many mob movies. My wife's got long blonde hair, sure, but I brushed that off. She'd been home that nighter, so I'd thought. I pressed for more. Anything else stand out? I asked. The receptionist paused, then said the woman had a laugh like a hyena. That hit me sideways. My wife's laugh could wake a coma patient. Still, I told myself it was a coincidence. I wasn't ready to trade my thief theory for something uglier. Next stop, the Rusty Fork. The waiter I got on the line had a memory like a steel trap. He remembered the coupler giggling over a second glass of Pinot, him charming the staff with a wrist tattoo peeking out from his sleeve. A red dress on her, he said, and a credit card swipe that matched my statement. My wife owns a red dress, the kind that turns heads, but I didn't know any tattooed charmers. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the notepad where I'd scribbled it all down. The dates lined up too neatly. Nights, she'd claimed, girls' night, or late hours at the office. My thief hypothesis was starting to wobble, and a new one was creeping in, sharp and ironic. I dug deeper, because that's what a man does when his empire's at stake. I pulled up old statements, cross-checked her stories. A $50 lingerie charge from a boutique I'd never seen her wear anything from. A $30 cab ride from a part of town she had no business being in. Each receipt was a breadcrumb, and I followed the trail with a mix of dread and amusement. By the time I had a stack of evidence hotel bills, dinner tabs, a florist receipt for roses, I never smelled. I wasn't mad anymore. I was impressed. She'd pulled off a heist right under my nose, funding her fling with my plastic. The brutality of it was almost art. The confrontation was my masterpiece. I waited for her to come home, sitting at the kitchen table with the evidence fanned out like a poker hand. She walked in, saw the papers, and her face went from tan to ghost white in half a second. I didn't yell or cry, just looked at her, a smirk tugging at my lips. After a beat, I slid the steakhouse bill across the table and said, "Honey, next time, use cash." She opened her mouth. But I was already up, hand raised to cut her off. I didn't need excuses. I'd caught her, fair and square, and the victory was mine. I grabbed my jacket and walked out, leaving her with the mess she'd made. As I hit the sidewalk, I mused to myself, trust is a currency she'll never afford again. Relationships? They're a gamble, and I'd just cashed out before the house took everything. I felt light, strong, like a man who dodged a bullet and found a better gun. The irony wasn't lost on Mahir I'd been chasing a thief, only to realize she'd been stealing more than money all along. I got in my car and drove off, the city lights blurring past. No looking back, no regrets, just a man moving on, proudly and attractively, ready for whatever's next. But as the adrenaline faded, a question nagged at me. What else had she hidden? Those receipts were just the surface. What other secrets were buried in her lies? I gripped the wheel tighter, a new spark igniting. Maybe this wasn't the end of the story, but the start of a bigger hunt. I dug deeper into the phone records, my curiosity burning hotter than a grease fire at a barbecue. That mystery number kept popping up late-night texts, calls stretching longer than a double feature at the drive-in. I cross-checked it against our contacts, but it was a ghost, no name attached, just a smug little string of digits staring back at me. I could have dialed it right then and there, sure, but that felt too bold, too needy. No, I'd play it smooth, let the clues pile up like unpaid bills until I had an airtight case. Then came the next bombshell on the credit card statement. 150 at a lingerie boutique. I'm no expert on satin and lace, but I'd bet my last dollar the last time my wife slipped into something from that shop, it wasn't for my eyes. I called the store, playing dumb as a bag of hammers, and the sales lady chirped about a gorgeous silk number, bought by a woman who sounded a lot like my wife-a-right down to the impatient foot. Tap I could practically hear through the phone. Oh, and she wasn't alone. Some guy was with her. Very appreciative, she said, all tall and slick-haired, the type who probably owns a vanity mirror and a lifetime supply of pomade. I thanked her, hung up, and let out a dry laugh. This was almost too absurd to be real. I wasn't ready to call it quits, though. I pulled up our shared calendar, and wouldn't you know either girls' nights and work trips synced up with the charges like a choreographed dance. It was so blatant I almost admired the laziness of it. Did she want me to catch her? Was this her messed-up way of daring me to look closer? Or did she just figure I was too thick to connect the dots? Well, I was connecting them now, and I had the receipts to prove it, both the paper kind and the kind that'd sting her pride. I took things up a notch and drove by the Grandview Hotel, just to get a feel for the place. It was all class doorman, bubbling fountain in the lobby, the kind of joint where you feel like a bum without a tie. I parked across the street, watching couples drift in and out, picturing which room they'd sneaked off to, which overpriced mattress they'd claimed. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. My imagination was already running wild, painting a picture I couldn't unsee. On the drive back, I swung by Morton's Steakhouse. The aroma of grilled ribeyes wafted out, and I could almost hear the clatter of forks and the murmur of small talk. I saw them in my minder and Mr. Slick, clinking glasses, giggling over some private joke. It made my blood simmer, but I kept it together. Rage wouldn't get me anywhere. I had to stay sharp, stay ahead. That night, I lay in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling while she snored softly, blissfully unaware of the tornado swirling in my skull. I could have shaken her awake, dumped all the evidence in her lap like a TV lawyer making his big reveal. But where's the sport in that? No, I'd drag this out, let it build slow and steady until the payoff hit her like a freight train. I turned away, facing the wall, and grinned into the shadows. This was far from over. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind me with a finality that felt almost poetic. I didn't need to hear her excuses or watch her scramble for some half-baked lie. I'd seen enough, proved enough. The game was over, and I'd won. My car was parked just down the block, and as I slid into the driver's seat, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked calm, not broken, not furious, just calm. Maybe that's what winning feels like when you've been playing with a stacked deck. I didn't go far that night. A buddy of mine, Jack, had a spare room he'd been offering ever since his divorce last year. I shot him a text. Mind if I crash for a bit? Shit hit the fan. His reply was instant. Doors open. Beer's cold. That's the thing about Jack, he doesn't ask questions unless you want him to. 20 minutes later, I was sitting on his lumpy couch, a bottle of IPA in hand, staring at the TV while some late-night game show buzzed in the background. You want to talk about it? He finally asked, cracking open his second beer. Not much to say, I replied, taking a swig. Caught her red-handed. Had the receipt. Slitteral receipts. She's been screwing around with some guy at the Grandview. I laid it all out for her tonight and walked. Jack whistled low. Damn, man. That's cold-blooded. You didn't even yell? Nah, I said, leaning back. Why give her the satisfaction? She knows she's busted. Let her stew in it. He nodded, like he got it, and we sat there in silence for a while, the game show host's fake enthusiasm filling the gaps. Eventually, I crashed on his spare bed, a lumpy mattress that smelled faintly of mildew, but it was better than going back to that house. Sleep didn't come easy. My brain kept replaying the look on her face when she opened that folder, but when it did, it was deep and dreamless. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee, and Jack banging around in the kitchen. Figured you'd need this, he said, sliding a mug across the counter. I grunted a thanks and sipped it black, letting the bitterness wake me up. My phone had a dozen missed calls from her, a couple of voicemails I didn't bother listening to, and a text that just said, "We need to talk." I deleted it all. Talking was her game now, not mine. I spent the day tying up loose ends, called my lawyer, a guy named Pete who'd handled a contract dispute for me a few years back. He was all business, told me to send over the evidence, said we'd have a solid case if it came to divorce. "You've got her dead to rights," he said, flipping through the photos and receipts I'd emailed. "She won't have a leg to stand on." I nodded, feeling a grim sort of satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, about making sure she didn't walk away clean. By afternoon, I swung by the house to grab some clothes and essentials. She wasn't there, probably at work, but the folder was still on the couch, pages scattered like she'd tried to make sense of it all. I packed a duffel, left my key on the counter, and walked out. The place didn't feel like home anymore. It was just a stage where the play had ended. Back at Jack's, I started sketching out the next chapter of my life. A new place, maybe a condo downtown, something simple, no memories attached. Work would keep me busy. I'd been slacking on a few projects, and now was the time to dive back in. And maybe, down the line, I'd figure out what trust looked like again. Not with her, never, with Herbert, with someone who didn't play games I didn't sign up for. For now, though, I had my freedom, my dignity, and a cold beer in my hand. That was enough. The rest would sort itself out. I woke up to the smell of coffee and the clatter of Jack banging around in the kitchen. Sunlight stabbed through the blinds, hitting me square in the face. For a moment, I forgot where I was. But then it all rushed back right. Jack's place, the spare room, the aftermath of my marriage imploding. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, feeling the ache in my back from that lumpy mattress. It wasn't luxury, but it beat sharing a bed with a liar any day. Stretching and cracking my neck, I shuffled into the kitchen. Jack slid a mug across the counter without a word. I grunted a thanks and took a sip, black and bitter, just how I liked it. He wasn't one for small talk, which suited me fine. We sat in silence, him scrolling through his phone, me staring at the wall, letting the caffeine do its job. Eventually, he asked if I had work today. I nodded, yeah, I needed to keep the wheels turning. He gave a knowing grunt, understanding that staying busy was the best way to outrun the mess in my head. That was the plan, bury myself in work, let the lawyer handle the legal fallout. I'd already sent Pete, my guy, the evidence, and he'd assured me we were solid if it came to divorce. The drive to the office was quiet, no radio, no noise, just the hum of the engine and my thoughts. Work swallowed me whole. I dove into projects I'd been neglecting, hammering out emails and reports like a man possessed. My colleagues kept their distance, probably sensing something was off. Or maybe they just knew better than to poke a bear when I was in the zone. Lunch was a blur. I grabbed a sandwich from the deli across the street and ate it at my desk. No time for breaks. By the time I looked up, night had fallen, and the office was nearly empty. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. The silence pressed down, and for the first time that day, my mind drifted back to Herto, the house, to the life we'd built, now a pile of rubble. I shook it off. No point in wallowing. I packed up and headed back to Jack's. He wasn't home, probably at the gym or out with friends. I microwaved some leftovers, ate standing up, then crashed on the couch. The TV flickered with some mindless sitcom, but I wasn't watching, just letting the noise fill the void. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, a mutual friend. She wanted to talk. I sighed. Sarah was one of those well-meaning types who usually ended up making things worse, but she was still a friend, and ignoring her felt petty. I texted back that I was game. She called right away. Her voice was soft, cautious, like she was tiptoeing through a minefield. She said she'd heard what happened and was sorry. I thanked her, keeping my tone flat. There was a pause. Then she mentioned that my wife had called her, that she was a wreck and wanted to talk, to explain. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Explain what? How she'd been sneaking around behind my back. How she thought I wouldn't notice. Sarah sighed, admitting I was probably right, but suggesting I might want to hear her out, for closure or some nonsense. Closure? I had all the closure I needed: receipts, photos, the whole damn dossier. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry she got caught. Sarah fell silent for a beat, then conceded I might have a point. She told me to take care of myself, and we ended the call. I tossed the phone onto the coffee table, my chest tight with a mix of anger and something else grief. Maybe, for what we'd lost, for the future that wasn't. I stood up, paced the room. Sitting there, stewing wasn't helping. I needed air, space. I grabbed my jacket and headed out. There was a dive bar down the street, cheap beer. No frills. Perfect. The night air was crisp, a relief after the stuffy apartment. I walked fast, my steps echoing on the pavement. Inside, the bar was dim, the jukebox pumping out some old rock tune. I found a stool at the end of the counter and ordered a whiskey neat. The bartender slid it over, and I took a sip, savoring the burn. Around me, people laughed, chatted, lived their lives. I was just another face in the crowd, anonymous and free. I nursed the drink, letting the noise wash over me. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of peace. No drama, no lies, just me and my thoughts. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild, to figure out who I was without her. It wouldn't be easy, but I'd face tougher challenges. I finished my drink, left a tip, and stepped back into the night. The walk home was quiet, my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. Jack was back when I got in, sprawled on the couch with a beer. He glanced up, asking if I was good. "Yeah," I said, and for once, I meant it. "I'm good." He nodded, and we settled into silence. Tomorrow was another day, another step forward, and I was ready. I woke up early the next morning, the kind of early where the world's still groggy and the coffee hasn't quite done its job. Jack's spare room was starting to feel less like a pit stop and more like a holding cell, but I wasn't ready to face the house yet, not until the papers were signed and the locks were changed. I rolled out of bed, the mattress protesting with a creak, and shuffled to the kitchen where Jack was already hunched over his mug, looking like he'd been up for hours. He raised an eyebrow, asking without words if last night had been rough. I shook my head, pouring my own coffee, telling him I was just thinking too much. He nodded, letting it lie, and we ate cereal in silence. The crunch of flakes, the only sound, oddly comforting, like we were two old soldiers sharing a foxhole. Work called again, and I answered, driving to the office with the windows down, letting the morning air slap some clarity into me. The day blurred by in a storm of meetings and emails, me running on autopilot, efficient as a well-oiled machine. My colleagues kept their distance, throwing the occasional pitying glance my way. Let them I wasn't the one who'd messed up here. By afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from Pete, the lawyer, his voice sharp and businesslike. He drafted the divorce papers, ready for my review, walking me through assets and debts with the precision of a surgeon. I told him to hit her hard but fair. She didn't deserve a handout, but I wasn't about to sink to her level. He promised to send everything over by evening, and I hung up, feeling a weight shift, like I'd taken a step closer to freedom. Later, I swung by the bar again, not for the whiskey but for the quiet. The same jukebox crooned, the same dim light threw shadows on the walls. I ordered a beer this time, something light, and settled into a corner booth, watching the regulars drift in and out. A young couple at the bar caught my eye, laughing, oblivious to the landmines relationships can hide. I smirked, raising my bottle in a silent salute to their naivety. They'd figure it out eventually, same as me. My phone buzzed again, another text from Sarah, persistent as ever. This one begged for a meetup, just coffee, no pressure. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won out. I tapped back that I'd see her tomorrow at the diner on Fife, then killed the screen. Whatever she had to say, it better be worth my time. Back at Jack's, I found him sprawled on the couch, a pizza box open on the coffee table, gesturing for me to join him. I grabbed a slice, and we watched some sports recap, the game a welcome distraction. For a moment, it felt normal, like the past week was just a bad dream. But normalcy was a lie, and we both knew it. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the divorce papers looming, Sarah's request nagging at me, and my own thoughts still a tangled mess. Trust, I mused, was like a rare coinance. You spent it, you couldn't cash it back in. Not with her, not with anyone. But maybe that was fine. Maybe starting over meant starting broke but free. The next morning, I met Sarah at the diner. She was already there, fidgeting with her coffee cup in a booth by the window. looking nervous as a cat in a dog park. I slid in across from her, ordered black coffee from the waitress without glancing at the menu. She studied me, saying I looked okay, and I leaned back, telling her I was better than I had any right to be. She nodded, then launched into her spiel, explaining she'd spoken to my wife again, who was apparently falling apart, desperate to talk, to make things right. I listened, keeping my face neutral, but inside I was laughing a dry, hollow laugh. Make things right? After the hotel charges, the steak dinners, the slick-haired shadow she'd been cozying up to. Fat chance. Sarah kept going, pleading her case, but I tuned out, watching the steam rise from my cup. Closure, she called it, like hearing more lies, would somehow tie a neat bow on this mess. I didn't need closure, I had the truth, cold and hard as the diner's linoleum floor. What I needed was distance, a clean break, a future where I wasn't looking over my shoulder. When she finished, I set down my mug, looked her in the eye, and told her thanks but no thanks. I was done talking, done listening, done playing her game. She sighed, defeated, and I left a few bucks on the table, walking out into the crisp morning air. The city buzzed around me, indifferent, and for the first time in days, I felt a spark of something like hope. Not for her, not for us, but for me alone, unburdened, ready to build something new. I drove back to Jack's, the radio off, my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. He was gone when I got there, probably at work or the gym, and the apartment was quiet. I sat on the couch, flipping through channels, but nothing held my attention. Instead, I pulled out my phone, scrolled through job listings, apartment rental small steps, toward a life that was mine, not ours. The divorce papers arrived by email that afternoon, a stark document spelling out the end. I skimmed it, nodded to myself, and hit reply, telling Pete to move forward. It was done. She'd fight, probably, but I had the upper hand, and she knew it. That night, I went back to the bar, ordered another beer, and watched the crowd. A woman at the end of the counter caught my eye, not my type, but there was something in her laugh, her ease, that made me think, maybe, just maybe, I could do this again someday. Not now, not soon, but someday. I finished my drink, left a tip, and stepped outside. The stars were faint, the city lights drowning them out, but I felt them up there, steady and sure, like me. The days blurred into a rhythm after that, each one a small victory in reclaiming my life. I kept crashing at Jack's, but the spare room was starting to feel less like a refuge and more like a launch pad. Work was my anchor, the office a fortress where I could drown out the noise of the past with the steady hum of productivity. My colleagues stopped throwing pitying glances my way, and I started throwing myself into new projects, ideas I'd shelved years ago when life got too comfortable. It was like I'd woken up, shaken off the dust, and remembered who I was before her. The divorce papers moved through the system like a freight train, no stops, no delays. Pete kept me updated, his emails crisp and efficient. She'd tried to fight back, of course, hiring some slick lawyer who threw around words like reconciliation and shared history, but I had the receipts literal and figurative, and she knew it. Her attempts to drag things out were pathetic, like a kid stalling bedtime. I told Pete to push harder, to end it clean, and he did. The final decree landed in my inbox one crisp Tuesday morning, a digital guillotine slicing through the last tether. I read it over coffee, felt a brief pang not of loss, but of relief, and then moved on. Sarah stopped texting after our diner meetup, which was fine by me. I didn't need her second-hand apologies or half-baked pleas for forgiveness on someone else's behalf. I had my own path now, and it didn't include looking back. Jack, though, stuck around, a steady presence in the chaos. We'd eat pizza, watch games, and shoot the breeze about nothing important, and slowly, the weight I'd been carrying started to lift. I found a new Placia small condo downtown, all sharp lines and modern glass, no ghosts of her lurking in the corners. Moving day was a breeze, just me and a U-Haul, unpacking boxes to the soundtrack of my own thoughts, no furniture from the old house, no memories to trip over. It was mine, fresh and untainted, and I liked the feel of it. One evening, a few weeks later, I went back to the bath, same dive with the jukebox and the dim lights. It was habit now, a place to think, to breathe. I ordered a beer, took my usual spot in the corner, and watched the crowd. The same young couple was there again, still laughing, still oblivious. And I smiled, not bitterly this time, but with a kind of worldly wisdom. They'd learn, or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my circus anymore. A woman sat a few stools down, nursing a gin and tonic, her eyes catching mine for a moment. She wasn't stunning, but there was something in her posture, her quiet confidence, that made me pause. I didn't approach, I wasn't ready for that, but I filed it away, a mental note that maybe, someday, I could try again, not with the same blind trust, but with something smarter, sharper, earned. I finished my beer, left a tip, and stepped outside. The night was clear, the city lights sharp against the sky, and I felt a surge of something I hadn't in months' pride, maybe, or just the simple satisfaction of being whole again. Trust, I thought, was overrated anyway. What mattered was knowing my worth, knowing I could stand alone and still come out on top. I drove back to the condo, the streets quiet, my mind settled. Jack texted later, asking if I wanted to grab a beer tomorrow. I typed back yes, feeling the first real grin in weeks stretch across my face. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. As I locked the door behind me, I glanced out the window at the city sprawled below, a restless, beautiful mess. I was part of it now, not tied to anyone's lies or games. The real thief had been in my bed, sure, but she was gone, and I was still here stronger, smarter, and ready for whatever came next.